to Thee Anomaly Podcast. The Anomaly Podcast highlights careers as well as shining light on the human experience of people who are mostly in STEM fields and are African Americans and people of color occupying spaces where they are typically the only one, or it's not many other African Americans or people of color that they are surrounded by on a daily basis in their career fields. Today is a very interesting episode. I wanted to introduce myself and give some background information on who I am and also what led me to start the Anomaly Podcast. And in order to do that, I will be interviewed by my 11-year-old son, Jordan McGlone. I have no idea of what he's actually going to ask me, so this is certainly going to be a fun experience, and thank you all for listening.
Hi, Molly.
Hi, sweetie.
This is going to be fun, I think.
Absolutely. So, Jordan?
What is the anomaly?
The Anomaly. So, I came up on the name The Anomaly really through two ways. One is there was a project that I was working on in my career that I feel was probably the moment when I realized just how impactful the work that I do as a meteorologist really is. And what happened was I was the satellite product manager for geostationary operational environmental satellites. And we launched a satellite that actually had a loop heat pipe anomaly. We found this out after, the satellite had launched and we began getting the data back from the instruments. And in order to overcome that, we had to, a lot of teams were developed to determine what the best mitigation strategy was in order for us to still get the information. And so I supported one of those teams. And the outcome of that is we had a partnership with another agency. And so we were able to use satellite data from another satellite in order to support the needs of the weather community. And so because of that, and in general, just being a scientist, someone who has dealt with computer programs, we are often looking for the anomalies, which are those results that are outliers. And so leading from that, one day I was in a discussion with a supervisor of mine, and I was saying that I felt like at that point there was really no intention of using my skills in that particular workplace. And I said, too often it happens that we, particularly as African Americans and African American females, get hired with no real intent of using our skills, but just to fulfill that quota that leaders are sometimes looking for. And I said, I feel like I'm being treated like some alien or just some anomaly that people don't know what to do with. And as I said that, it stuck with me because I said, you know what, though? I actually am an anomaly when I look around the room because I am completely different from the people that I work with. And oftentimes I have been told, I don't know what to do with you, and when you're told that, and even when you're in these environments, even though I know my credentials and, all of the experiences that I have that qualify me or even overqualify me to do positions, that feeling of isolation and that lack of belonging still does have an impact, on how I show up and how I'm able to do my work sometimes. And so, that's something that I constantly have to overcome. But I know that there are many others who face some of those barriers in the workplace as well, and even in other environments. So I wanted to give people the opportunity to address, who they are in a safe space. So that's why I started the podcast. And then there's also the Anomaly Consulting, where I provide information and strategies and guidance and assist people in different organizations and agencies and even schools with processing scientific information or even developing strategies to look towards the future to know what direction they should go in when it comes to weather, climate, and also engaging communities.
Hmm. So what was your top help thing that really got you the spark to create the anomaly? Like, I know you said that being the only African American lady in the room really made you the anomaly,
Mm-hmm.
but the anomaly is different than everyone else.
Mm-hmm.
So, how exactly were you able to be with all these different people in a room that you are different in,
Mm-hmm.
with being able to be the person who isn't exactly treated the way that everyone else is?
Yeah, so it's not easy. I will start with that. I remember during the pandemic when we were at home, and one day, it was a Friday afternoon, and I was in a meeting, and I had the screen where you could see all of the people that were in the meeting with me. And I don't know if you remember this, but you came in the room, and as you often did, you would come and get right in the camera. And so you saw everyone else that I was meeting with, but you said to me, you said, "Mommy, you're the only girl in this meeting." And I said, "Yes." And I said, "Well, what else do you recognize?" And then you said, "You're also the only black person in this meeting." And I said, "Yes, but what else did I say to you?" I said, "Even though I am the only black female in this meeting, it does not mean that I am any less than anybody else in this meeting." I was actually leading the meeting, and I was leading that team, actually. And so, what I would say is, I think growing up in the house that I grew up in with my parents, telling me constantly, telling me and Irish, your aunt E, um, constantly telling us that my mom used to say it all the time, there's a great big old world out there and you need to explore it. That led me to constantly think that I could do anything, you know. Um, we were surrounded by support. I remember being surrounded by people who were doing a lot of work leading in the communities, teaching us the importance of community service, teaching us to help others, also making sure that we were put in front of crowds, like at church, the impact of leading scriptures or leading worship services, uh, as a child, kind of like you're doing right now. That also led me to know that I could get up in front of a crowd and speak. And that was also a part of, or is a part of my job. And so it also let me know that I have what it takes, no matter who else is in the room. Um, we were we were taught a lot about the civil rights movement just because. So Jordan refers to my parents as Gigi and Junior. And so, Gigi and Junior grew up during the civil rights movement. And so they were constantly telling us stories about how they grew up. And what that did was it gave us a sense of pride in our culture and the things that people had overcome. And so just knowing all of those things, making sure that I got the education and the training that I needed, pushing myself through various experiences gives me the confidence to continue to show up, even though I may be the only person or the anomaly in the room. And I also just as a scientist again, I think that the anomalies are very valuable, when we experience them. And I say that because it's a learning opportunity. It's an opportunity to expand your way of thinking. And that's what we have to do when we encounter people who may not come from the same background as we do, may have a different way of thinking. We have to open our minds, and listen and engage in it, so that we can learn new things.
Um, well, what exactly is the anomaly? Like, I remember you telling me that it would be like community helping and like stuff like that.
Mm-hmm.
But what exactly is the anomaly and what does it do?
So the anomaly does several things. The podcast that we're doing now, that's a part of it. Again, because now, really the way to get information out is through social media, podcasts. Not a lot of people watch television, just straight television a lot like they used to, because we have our cell phones and computers and things like that, iPads and all of those things out constantly. So a lot of ways that people are getting information now is through social media and podcasts. And so, I wanted to have a platform to speak and to share information. So that's why I decided to include a podcast in the business. The other aspect of it is, you mentioned communities. For me, I always have at the forefront of my mind, how is my work going to save a life? Or how is my work as a meteorologist and physical scientist going to teach someone about weather and climate change so that they know what to do in the face of severe weather? Weather and climate change is something you can't escape. Weather is going to impact all of us, and all communities need to understand the impact and their vulnerability so that they know how to overcome them when they are actually faced with severe weather. What has happened throughout many years is that there are communities who have been underserved and who have been historically ignored when it comes to making sure that they have the resources to overcome storms. For example, if a community is hit by a hurricane, but that community does not, have many resources to evacuate, even when there's a mandatory evacuation. Um, Also, there may be people who physically can't get out of the way of storms. Think about a tornado, whereas the forecasting capability has drastically improved over the years, meaning that there's more time that we know these severe storms are coming now. At the same time, people don't always prepare far in advance. And so I would love to be the person who provides those resources and information to communities, actually going out and talking to people who may have not been connected with in the past. And that would allow me to understand what the needs are in order to then communicate that back to policymakers, or other people who are doing research and looking to improve forecast and information, emergency management, those types of things. So somewhat being a liaison, which is a person who's that in between person, the person that can talk to the community, bring the information back, and then that lead to policy changes, and then that lead back to more resilient communities.
When you were saying that most of the time people don't just sit down and watch TV,
Mm-hmm.
but back in the day, people used to love watching TV
Mm-hmm.
because they didn't have phones,
Right.
laptops, and computers.
Mm-hmm.
So, with being the anomaly and being the person who's not treated as well as other people, even though everyone should be treated the exact same way
Mm-hmm.
as everyone else should be, um, Tell me, how does the anomaly help with people like that? Like, does it help with people who are like the anomaly in different case scenarios?
Mm-hmm.
Or does it mostly focus on community and health and stuff like that?
Right. So, as you mentioned, there, you said back in the day when people used to watch a lot of television. So, people take Gigi, for example. Now, Gigi does sit and watch
Mm-hmm.
television. She still watches the news and other television shows, and things like that. But then there are people who will only watch their phones,
Mm-hmm.
and so you have to take into account everybody. How am I getting the information to the people that will watch television? How am I getting information to the people that are, more so focused on social media? So you need to, figure out, especially when it comes to something as serious as severe weather conditions, how do you reach all of these people? And that takes strategy development, coming up with knowing who has what vulnerabilities. For example, um, people who live in cities don't have the same vulnerabilities as people who live in rural areas. So when there are severe storms and say there is a major power outage, the communities where there are a lot more people live in the city, likely their power will be restored much faster than people who live in rural communities. And so, those are things that we need to understand, and what does that mean, for the people who may not have their power restored for a very long time. Do they have what it is that they need to survive? Those
Mm-hmm.
types of things. So you mentioned also the health aspect, because you know that not only am I a scientist, but I'm also a bodybuilder.
Mm-hmm.
And I'm an amateur competitor. So I compete in bodybuilding competitions, and that is also a passion of mine,
Mm-hmm.
because one of the ways that I decide, or one of the reasons I decided to pursue a healthier lifestyle than what I had been, and to lose weight and try to maintain a healthy weight, is because I want to make sure that I am my best self, so that I can be what I need for you, and to keep things going, you know. And in doing that, I followed my passion of learning about health, in addition to exercising and understanding how it impacts my body and illnesses, but also the generational illnesses that, people in our family have had and overcome, wanting to share that information with others as well. And so it's also, when I think of health and another business that I would like to pursue, yes, that is a part of it. And that would include meal plans, and also me being a personal trainer. So, yeah.
I remember not too long ago you talking about how if we weren't treated differently because of the color of our skin, that we in our family and lots of other people would have a bunch of land. With that, with touching on that,
Mm-hmm.
and was that something that helped you think of being of the anomaly and how it came together, or was that just something that came up every now and then? Because I've heard you talk about it a little bit of a lot.
Yes. So, what we talk about is, one of the things is that I want to own some land,
Mhm.
because I want my own farm and garden. And I also want to use that to support food security, especially here in the state of Mississippi. But also, I think what you also may be mentioning is, when it comes to particularly African Americans, and just looking at our family history and in the state, you are probably referring to the story that I've mentioned about, I think he is my great great grandfather, Martin Kennedy. What I've said about that is he was an extremely intelligent man, and he was an accountant, meaning that for businesses, he would, make sure that they were properly using their money and paying taxes and things like that, right? And he was known for being able to do calculations in his head because, of course, back then, there were no calculators and computers and stuff like that we use now. And so, what what my mom used to tell me, my mom and my dad, was that I had traits of Martin Kennedy because a lot of times when it would come to me doing work, and even now we've talked about this, how I process information in my head. And so they would tell me about him, but they also would tell me about how because he was an accountant, this is something that has happened to a lot of Black people throughout the years, and that is land being taken away from them, and it was apparently happening to our family many years ago. And because he had the relationship that he had with some of the business owners, he was able to save the land. And what I was saying is that if land was not taken away from us historically, then yes, we would have, more property and things like that. And that process of I have to protect my land is something that I believe comes up even when people need to evacuate from storms. When Hurricane Katrina impacted the Gulf Coast, my dad, Junior, as you referred to him, would not evacuate and leave the land, our home. And it bothered me because at this point I had a bachelor's degree in meteorology, and I'm telling them this storm is coming. It's going to be really bad. I need for you all to pack up, get your insurance papers, go to Atlanta and stay with Iris, my sister. And my mom eventually went. She took my grandmother, Granny. She took her and everything and went, but my dad wouldn't go. And it bothered me for many, many years. And I even remember crying to him and saying, Daddy, why didn't you just leave? Because he ended up having to go to the hospital because of some illnesses that he had and not being able to cook his food because the power was out. He was eating things that he shouldn't have been, ends up in the hospital. I'm in Maryland and can't get to him. Gigi has gone to Atlanta, and of course, Iris is in Atlanta. And so I'm devastated, and extremely upset. And his mindset was that as the man of the house, he had to stay and protect the house. And I was like, but Daddy, you can't do anything. This is a storm, a major storm. But now I can better understand his mindset. That's something that he and many other Black men are taught. You have to protect your land and have it there because not only is it something that you've worked for, but it's also what you're passing down to your children. And so, yes, this severe storm could take me out, but you're going to find me on my land to know who it belongs to. Because the other thing is that, just going back to many years ago and my great great grandfather, is that a lot of times land was passed down through word of mouth. You know how we were playing Monopoly yesterday, and I was like, "You better give me my deed for my for my property." A lot of times, land was passed down through word of mouth without a deed. So if you don't have the proper documentation to say, "No, this does belong to me," then it could have been taken away. And so, when you ask me if the anomaly looks to address that in a certain way, yes. Because what I would love to do is talk to people, get them to understand, from the policymaker perspective, this is something that needs to be addressed. From the landowner perspective, yes, I understand that you want to protect the land, but this is what could happen. And do you have what you need in place, in order to really protect your land? you know. So that is, something that I'm looking to do, yes.
Hmm. So, with the anomaly, I have asked you about like food pantries with community, and
Mm-hmm.
because with homeless people, they don't have the right food and
Mm-hmm.
places to stay.
Mm-hmm.
Would you be like helping stuff like that and like organizing different events for them to come to and get some food and stuff? Would you be doing something kind of like that?
Supporting those things, absolutely. Absolutely. In any way that I can. Um, and what I will say, different ways to use my degree, meteorology, in understanding weather and climate change. It does impact food security. So, you know how I talked to you about not just looking on the surface of things, but also digging deeper to understand why. There may be communities that have a large amount of people who don't have food. Why is that? You know, is that happening because they are in environments that have been impacted by severe weather and climate change and have not been able to recover? You know, what are the systemic issues behind that that's causing it? And if it is a weather and climate change component, what information is needed? What resources are needed to mitigate that?
Mm-hmm.
So those are, you know, things that I think about. And it's an issue, especially here in the state of Mississippi, that needs to be solved and mitigated.
So, with the anomaly, just to be clear, the anomaly is something for boosting confidence in a bunch of different people. So, is that really what the anomaly is, or is that?
So that's the impact that I look to have
Mm-hmm.
with the anomaly is inspiring people to pursue their dreams,
Mm-hmm.
and in any way that I can, giving them the resources so that they feel empowered, to keep going, even if they are facing challenges or discrimination in any way. Now, how we get to that impact is through engaging communities, um, me being able to take science and data and then translate that and support policymakers so that we can see true change, not just people saying that they're going to do something, but how can I support communities as well as the policymakers to get them to understand what the needs are and helping strategies be developed on how to solve problems and mitigate, different issues, is what the anomaly is.
Okay, well, that's all we have for today.
Thank you.
Mm-hmm. Thank you for having me.
Absolutely.